Did the Dallas Cowboys find a starter with one of their day three picks? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. We're making our way through this class, learning a little bit more about them each day. And I'm excited to talk about this group. This is a group of folks that, of all these people that were drafted, honestly, I feel like we may have talked about the least. So yeah. I'm excited to kind of get into them a little bit more and dive deep.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the Cowboys' first two selections on day three, Junior Fehoku and Asim Richards from North Carolina. Let's start with Fehoku, who the Cowboys selected in the fourth round. A little bit of an interesting selection here, a lot of projection here, but what did you see from Fehoku when you turned on the tape?
I think that what you see is clearly what I think the Cowboys have plans for, right? This is a guy who you see kind of move in up and down the line for them at San Jose State. You saw him kick outside, obviously spending a lot more time outside. You see him even in a 2-point standing stance. And then you also see him kind of kick inside. And what you see is violence. It's just he's just sudden and explosive, and his hands are constantly moving. I compared him to Tyron Crawford simply in the fact that, think about a smooth athlete. Think about someone, a long strider, dipping underneath the table and then smoothly making the corner, and how kind of fluid all that movement is. That is not what this guy is doing. No. What this guy is doing is exploding off the ball, punching you in the face a bunch of times, and swiping his hands and just trying to throw 100 different moves to try to get around you. Just is constantly just this ball of energy that is, being thrown at a blocking scheme. And sometimes you see him you get through and make it past the line of scrimmage and destroy a play. Sometimes you see him do a really terrible half spin and get completely blocked out of the play. But I think what you see, what I think the Cowboys coaches saw was a guy who is a big, not super athletic in the sense of a Randy Gregory type bendy guy, but athletic in the sense that he's 280 pounds and explosive, in that sort of way. A guy who they could just either, play the kind of Chauncey Golston role, that previous one where he plays a little bit outside early and a little bit inside later, and just a guy that they can throw at blocking schemes and just be a wrecking ball. And that's what I saw from him, and I think that's likely to be his role in the NFL as well.
Yeah, if you watch his edge tape, I mean, it's clear he just doesn't win with athleticism, but where he wins is he plays his butt off, right? And I think his hand usage and technique is well above average, especially for a guy coming from San Jose State. I don't think offensive tackles there were ready for it. I still think his best tape came when he was playing inside, either as a 3 technique or as a 4-eye, and he's just shooting gaps, right? You just ask him to shoot a gap, get up there as quick as you can, and try to create havoc. That's where I think his best game comes from. And frankly, I think that's how the Cowboys are going to use him is, hey, just go create chaos. And we'll try to, that's what we're going to just try to do up front. And we've got all these other guys that'll clean up your sacks. Go create havoc up front. I see why the Cowboys were interested in him in day 3.
Yeah, I think, likely what will happen is that I think that the trajectory of this player is moving towards a 3 technique, right? Similar to Golston, where
it's just how quickly do we get there?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think he starts out as an outside player, but I think eventually the idea is that you will reduce him down into a full-time 3 technique as he gets stronger in the NFL. So, but yeah, I think you nailed it. Until then, We're going to see him kind of as a 5 tech. We've seen them deploy that a little bit of a 4-eye, right? And I think he's going to be valuable in those spots simply as someone who's a block deconstructor.
Yep.
I think he'll also be valuable as part of, the Cowboys like to do a lot of twists, a lot of stunts.
Yep.
I think he'll be valuable in that as well, just because he's so violent and sudden that I think him kind of crashing down on an unsuspecting guard as someone else loops in around him, that could be really effective.
And let's just talk about his frame for a second. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see his RAS score there, but 6036, 276 pounds. Now, that is what he measured in at the combine. At his pro day, he came in at 283 pounds. So you're already seeing him starting to bulk up a little bit. I was watching a call this morning where he said, yeah, the coaches told me to start bulking up. So I don't know how much good weight you can put on in 4 months before the season starts, but I think 286, 287, if he could be around that range, I think that's what the Cowboys are looking for here.
He's gonna call up his cousin and say, "Hey, how do I put on 20 pounds of muscle?" His cousin. Just we're clear, his cousin is not Simi Fehoko. It's Vita Vea is his cousin.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what he's not going to ever be. Vita Vea,
No.
the 340-pound dancing bear. But I think you could get him up to 290 and
that's the goal.
Still
like
have a very
291,
comfortable
right?
athlete, right? Yeah.
I think that's the goal. Like if you're projecting a year or 2 years from now, we want you at 291. Yes, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of speed and quickness, but you've got so much there already compared to other defensive tackles that it's worth the trade-off. And again, you're going to be a rotational defensive lineman that can play as a 5 technique, can play as a 4-eye, that can kick inside as a 3 technique. If we want you as a base end, on certain running situations, we can do that, but that's going to be your role with this team.
Yeah, just just very dense player. Like I don't mean that in a stupidity mean. I mean physically dense. Like
yes.
you see, like he's
just
very
big.
thick everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. And you see a lot of these kind of you see a lot of these Polynesian players that come in and that are the bigger body type, right? And then you see these other guys who are like the 260, but they're so thick, like they're just like so dense, like boned, and have huge wrist and ankles. So I think that him putting on this weight is going to be no problem for him, and carrying it is not going to be an issue. Honestly, I don't even know if we would notice the difference between this athletic testing at 276 and where he is almost 10 pounds heavier currently. So I definitely think that they'll have some success kind of putting some weight on him without losing too much explosion.
And I will say, typically the guys that benefit the most from an NFL weight room aren't the guys that are coming from Georgia to the NFL. It's the guys that are coming from San Jose State to the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised if he looks totally different a year from now with a full year of strength training in a program that has a plan for him.
Dietary stuff.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah. It's just more comprehensive in the Cowboys than it is the San Jose State.
I want to ask you about what his role is going to be this year and what it might mean for the rest of the interior defensive line next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back if bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I really, really hope that you bet on the Lakers last night to beat the Warriors. I don't even know if Landon knows. He lives right in LA, doesn't follow basketball. Did you have like an earthquake or something when Laker fans were jumping up and down?
Oh, are the Lakers playing?
Oh, God, this makes me so mad. So bad. There's no better place to bet on the Lakers in all of the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official betting partner of the NBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to continue our draft series talking about the Cowboys' other day 3 picks. You're not going to want to miss that. All right, Landon. How do you think Fehoku fits into the defensive line rotation this year? Because it looks to be a little crowded right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the guy that actually may need to watch himself a little bit here is Neville Gallimore. And I know that doesn't really make a ton of sense because they don't necessarily play the same spot, but I do think that drafting Junior Fehoku really allows you to kind of lean into the final part of the transition for Golston to make his way from defensive end to defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And I think that what that ultimately means is, and that may not mean that Golston completely, goes away from playing defensive end at all. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see him, take some snaps there. But the fact is that if he's going to be playing more and more defensive tackle, maybe that gives you the kind of freedom to maybe save some money and say goodbye to Neville Gallimore, who just, look, I mean, we've made it clear. It just hasn't happened with him. So I think Fehoku is a guy that, has the kind of strength and explosion that you can put on the field right away. He's not, speed's not his game, but I think he has that kind of disruptive play and violence to his game that will be able to translate right away. So I do think that you could see him early on as probably a game day inactive as they work him
as a healthy scratch. Yeah.
Yep. As they work him up a little bit. And then as the season goes on, maybe you see an injury in one of those spots and you just kind of see him start to subbing in, and then they slowly start working him in. And then he becomes kind of part of the rotation, similar to what you saw at the end of the year with Golson. So I think that's the trajectory for him. And then the idea being by year 2, year 3, maybe he makes a transition to 3-tech a little bit quicker than Golson, because frankly, I think he might be bigger than Golson is right now.
He's certainly more athletic than Golson. There's no doubt about it. No, he's not as long. He's not as long as Golson, and that's the trade-off.
And I think that's the thing that is why Golson has worked out at 3-technique at times, is because that kind of length at tackle is defensive tackle can be kind of rare for explosive guys, right? Yes. Like you see the length is usually associated with, the bigger nose tackle guys who are 6'5", 320 plus pounds, right? I think back to David Irving, right? And why David Irving had some successes, because he was an explosive, quick guy who was very svelte despite his height, but he had very, very long arms, and that explosion plus length was helpful. That's where Golson will win. With Fehoku, it's more, like we said, that get off, explode into the gap, be violent with your hands, and that's going to work both inside and outside early as he slowly, like you said, slowly makes his way towards a 2-3 technique.
Yeah, if Fehoku wants to earn snaps as a rookie, he's going to have to beat out Neville Gallimore, who you mentioned. And then I kind of think Quinton Bohanna, because I just don't see the Cowboys holding on to 3 1 techniques, right? I mean, because if you call Mozzie a 1 technique, you call Jonathan Hankins a nose tackle /1 technique, and then there's Bohanna. I don't know if they have room for all 3 of those guys in the roster. And if you want just somebody else who gives you a little bit more versatility, I think Fehoku has it, but I don't know if Bohanna can offer you that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the person, just to kind of sum up, because I think what we're all kind of saying the same thing, the position group that is likely to take a hit on cut down day from the Junior Fehoku draft pick is the defensive tackle,
without a doubt.
Group. Not less so the defensive end group, which is very full.
Dante Fowler's not Dante Fowler's not losing his job. Sam Williams is not losing his job to Fehoku. No. It's one, if not 2, of those interior defensive linemen. Let's talk about the Cowboys' next pick on day 3. Asim Richards, an offensive tackle /guard from North Carolina. We both watched his tape in the last couple of days. What did you see when you saw him?
I'm a fan of Asim Richards. You saw a lot of.
Is it Asim or Awesome? I want to make sure we're clear.
It's Asim. I think it's Asim. I could be wrong. We should. I looked. It's A-H. Seam, so I think it's Asim, right?
Asim, okay. Just want to make sure.
I say awesome.
I'm terrible
I keep saying
with
awesome
names,
because I'm terrible too. So apologies to Asim or Awesome, however you say your name. I'm a fan. I think what you saw is a guy who has a lot of athleticism. He's got quite a few starts. That was the thing I think was surprising. He's a 3-year starter for North Carolina. The more I watched this tape, the more I just felt like, why isn't this guy being considered a little bit higher? I don't know if he just got lost in the shuffle with some of this other stuff, but I see a guy who I think he's a good athlete. He's a very good foot athlete. He certainly has the athleticism to play tackle if you want. He gets out in front of folks. He shuffles his feet well. He's got he's got really good grip strength. Once he gets his hands on you, it's it's hard to get away from him. There, I think the things where he struggles is a lot of technique based, right? Like he will get out in front of a guy, and then it becomes time to kind of reset your hands, like while you're in that kind of later part of the snap. And he doesn't quite do that quick enough, and then usually the guy will get off him because of that. Will get off his block because of that. And you also see it where he his issues to me are all hand technique based mostly.
Well,
right?
I saw a couple times where his hands would get so wide.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
And
it's like he's trying to tackle them, right?
Right.
Like
and what ends up happening is he's not holding, just to be clear. They're just so wide, but the defensive lineman will put their head down, and then the quarterback will get outside the pocket, and it looks like a hold, and you get a flag. Now, he's not actually holding them. It's just bad hand technique. That's where
who's that remind you of? Who's that remind you of?
A little bit of Tyler Smith that way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, right? It's where the guy needs to have his hands up in here tight so that his punch is at the defender's chest, as opposing to trying to like envelop the guy. And look, I understand the technique. You're trying to envelop the guy to keep him from getting inside and out, but that's, if you miss even just a little bit, that's holding, like without a doubt. So even if you get it right, the guy can try to pull away left or right as the quarterback runs, and that will look like holding, even if it isn't holding. So technique stuff needs some work, but I mean, he's got all the physical traits as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's what I was going to say is when I watched him at the Senior Bowl, where he was playing left tackle and right guard and a little bit of left guard in practices, when he was getting beat, it wasn't due to a lack of athleticism or a lack of power. It was all technique stuff. And it's just how long is it going to take him to basically tear down his technique and start all over? Because I think you kind of have to with him.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think that's the standard for offensive linemen at this point in the NFL.
Yes, I think it is.
All these guys have to have their technique torn down. The technique that the people are learning in college is just not good. It's just because it's basically built for what that offense does, and they don't want to have to teach a bunch of advanced techniques. Offensive line play in the NFL is much more difficult than it is in college. So that's the case with a lot of these guys anyways, even the upper tier guys, right? So for me, I think this is a guy that if it's just about kind of getting some better hand placement, some understanding of having a better feel for when it's time to reset your hands, right? To have the feel, okay, this guy's about to get loose from this grip. Let me reset my hands. Let me shuffle my feet so I'm blocking him. And I think if he can kind of just get a little bit better, synchronicity between his feet and his hands, then I think he's going to be good. And that's actually why a move to guard, I think, makes some sense, right? If you're already talking about, kind of trying to redo some of the punch stuff, you're trying to marry his feet to his hands, giving him less room that he has to cover while doing that, right, gives the defender less options, less room to get away, right? Like it's a lot harder for him to get away. It's kind of what we talked about with Tyler Smith last year, except Tyler solved those problems so quickly. Even when he moved out to tackle, it didn't become an issue. So I think it's a similar thing with Asim. I think a move inside will actually help kind of hide some of his issues while he's still trying to learn some of the more advanced hand technique placement, foot marrying sort of stuff.
The other thing that I'll say is, man, you watch him like against Notre Dame. It's not always pretty. Actually, in fact, it's never really pretty. But he gets the job done, right? Yeah. And a lot of times we care too much about style points at offensive linemen. We like the guys that have the really clean kick slides and that have the power. But man, when you're drafting day 3 offensive linemen, you just want guys that aren't going to get you killed out there. And I think
I'll give you a great example of just that, right? There's a rep that I can't remember who he's playing, but I think he gets his feet crossed or something, but he's not able to get both hands of a punch as the rusher is going wide around him. And he blocks him with one hand. It's not a long arm or anything, but it's like he doesn't get the other hand there. Yeah. And even with just one hand in his chest, he's able to control the defender. And that's the kind of thing you can't teach, right? Is like what happens when the best technique isn't available to you? What are you going to be able to do?
Out, right?
Yeah, to figure it out. That's where I think Asim Richards is kind of ahead of the game a little bit, is that he makes it work, even if it's not pretty.
All right, let's talk about his fit and role with the Cowboys in 2023 next. All right, Landon, where do you project Richards playing for the Cowboys this year? Do you think he's an option at left guard right away? Is he somebody that they stash and develop, or do you think they just leave him at left tackle?
I think all of those are in play,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, I think that they will definitely give him looks at left guard because there's a need there. I think they've going to take a comprehensive look at the position and include Chuma Dogba, include Asim Richards,
Matt
obviously
Farniak?
Farniak. I think Tyler Smith obviously is an option here if they need to go that route. I think they're going to throw a lot of different
Josh
stuff at
Ball?
the wall to see what, maybe, to see what happens,
Doubt it.
right? I doubt that he makes that, but and I think that that's going to determine. I think no matter what, they're going to be training him at both guard and tackle.
Yeah.
I think
He's
that
going to have
that's
to,
just,
right?
yeah. I think that well, I think that that's what they want to do with all these guys. Really, is if they have the flexibility, they're going to train you at both to get you ready for both. So I think that if he comes in and he takes to the coaching right away and it moves quickly, maybe he is a guy who is in competition for that starting left guard position right away. I would say that seems on the high end of his expectations, though. I think it's probably more realistic that he's either a game day inactive, especially early on, and then as the season goes on, maybe he starts to work in if there's injuries, and similar to what we just talked about with Junior Fehoku, except maybe without a distinct plan to rotate him in, like I think you can do with Junior Fehoku because he's a defensive lineman. So I think it's likely a situation where he,
he's going to be
could
cross-trained. There's no doubt.
Yeah,
Right?
he'll definitely be cross-trained. Could he potentially be the starter at left guard? Maybe. If he comes in and hits the ground running and works hard, I think he has the strength to play guard right away and not get, just battered around. But I also wouldn't expect it. I would say that I think he's probably going to need some time to season a little bit.
My guess is the Cowboys would love to have him take like the 7th or 8th offensive line spot on the roster this year and then work at being a future starter in 2024 at guard, right? Like I think that's the ideal outcome here. But I won't be surprised if he has like a Jamir Sawyer career path, like we saw last year with the Chargers. A guy that started a bunch of games at tackle at Georgia. They thought he was going to be a guard. They had an injury at left tackle. They stick him out there, and because he has so much experience, it ends up not being too bad. I won't be surprised if Richards ends up doing something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are all within the range of a spectrum of outcomes for this player. I think he has the kind of experience against talent. I mean, he played in a Power 5 division with a top quarterback, so he knows what it's like to have to pass block for a guy who's moving around back there. Those are all valuable experiences, and if he kind of hits the ground running, like I said, he has the strength, I think, to play right away. So if he can get his technique where he needs to be, maybe he pushes for a starting position out of training camp.
The last thing I would say is I thought he needed a lot of work as a run blocker. Like he's definitely more effective as a pass blocker right now. In my opinion, I think he has a long ways to go as a run blocker.
I think that's the kind of technique stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Where his hand placement, and I think when he gets his helmet in his hands in the right spot in the fit, then he can drive people off the ball. But that's not happening consistently right now. So I don't disagree.
Yeah, I like him though. Like if you're gambling on a offensive lineman on day 3, this is the type of guy to do it. Like somebody who does have a bunch of starts, who if you can tweak 1 or 2 things with his technique and hand work, hand position, maybe you do get, at best a starter and maybe at worst a solid backup that can play 3 different spots for you. It's not a bad pick at all by the Cowboys. I like it quite a bit. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day, or tomorrow on the show, we're going to be talking about 2 more of the Dallas Cowboy draft picks. So make sure you tune in for that. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Please check us out on YouTube. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we'll see you guys next time.